Okay, let's jump right in. So typically, for those who are familiar with the podcast, I don't typically discuss day-to-day events like current events or what's going on in the news. I think that there's so much analysis happening out right there, like on that level, that I like to kind of take like a bigger perspective, a bigger view of our, of the nature of our reality. I like to talk about quantum physics. I like to talk about philosophy, books that I've read, takeaways, sort of macro level things. However, I got a message this morning from a listener. We've sort of like we're good friends as well. And they were telling me that they had a question about my thoughts regarding the Travis Scott concert that happened over the weekend. For those who are unfamiliar, as I was up until like this morning, there was a concert. I think it was in Houston or something like that, and there was a crowd. It was a mob of like 200,000 people. Something happened, caused a stampede, which essentially led to the deaths of like 8 people. And this listener also started sending me like screenshots from Scott's Instagram page, his social media page, where there was a lot of symbolism that was being like that he had incorporated into his, tours, that if you can link them back to sort of, for lack of better phrasing, like, like, let me see, I'm trying to pull up the image. There's something called the Mouth of Molok, the Fiery Mouth of Baal, a painting by Hieronymus Bosch, and then they kind of linked it all together to the Astroworld Festival, and he has like this huge head, Travis Scott did, with his mouth open, and people were like walking into it, and somehow some people are connecting the imagery that was utilized on stage by Scott, and they're kind of essentially indirectly saying that and I laugh when things are uncomfortable. I don't laugh because I think it's funny, by the way, for those who are not familiar. I laugh when things sort of like make me kind of feel like a bit leery. Yeah. But a lot of conclusions are being drawn from very small amount of information and extrapolated to the macro rather. And people are saying like they're pulling imagery from his Instagram where he's pointing to like an eye or whatever. There's like a single eye and he's pointing to it. Okay. And then there was another article I saw. It was posted on his page, and it says the true dystopia is here. It's a picture of Scott, but he has like demon ears or elf ears and pointy teeth. And then it says, escape plan. When the end arrives, it's really the beginning. And then this monster with his mouth open. And then his comments, this was 3 days ago, can't wait to see you at the festival. Right. So people take these sort of things, right? And then they extrapolate and they say, well, this is evidence that what happened was intentional, and that, these people who lost their lives, these children who lost their lives, and it's hard for me to say, but I'm going to say it just so that those of you who aren't familiar know what's going on and what's being said. But a lot of people are saying that these children who lost their lives were somehow like sacrificial, like they were sacrificed, and this was intentional, and that Scott is like a demon worshiper, and like he knew what was going on, and this was all how everybody wants to link everything to the elites in Hollywood being like Satan worshipers, and this is all part of some grand scheme to like consume, I don't know, our souls or whatever. I get it. Okay, on some level, I get it. I've talked about this over and over again, though, about the fact that these sort of imageries that is used against us, it's used intentionally to sort of create like an air of like mysticism and power around these so-called elites that kind of run our lives or whatever. But it's like the Wizard of Oz rather. So the analogy I use, I think that I talked about this on the Squid Games episode, and then the episode right after that one as well. I said the analogy I used is like I likened it what they do with these imageries, like for example, if you go all the way back to like I think the 90s or even like the 2000s, everybody was talking about like they'd caught people like Bill Clinton and things of that nature, those kind of people worshiping at the Bohemian Groove, right? And so there's pictures circulating. Alex, I forget what his name is, but he stormed there with like a camera and everything like that. The guy that does or did InfoWars, I don't know if he still does it anymore. But just theatrics. And I likened all of that, and theatrics is the right word. I likened all of that to like the Wizard of Oz, right? It's all smoke and mirrors. It creates like an energy, like this vibe, this feeling of fear from the masses. So that the things that we need to do, which is unite, work together, and essentially create a different world than the one that we have now, where, the few benefit, at the cost of the many, right? Instead, they use these sort of images to create fear around them, to create like a sense of mystery around them. But at the end of the day, these are human beings just like us. They're not reptilians. Not to say that I don't think reptilians exist. They're just regular human beings with names and addresses. That if you really wanted to do your due diligence, like to find out who's really controlling things, and why, you don't have to dig that deep. You know what I mean? And typically the why is, it's not as intense as we think it is. It's not as like, scary, mysterious as we think it is. At the end of the day, it's just, how can we get people talking and how can we make money? That's all. That is what, for the most part, at least on the micro level, runs the show. It's greed. Okay? And how do I explain the imagery that I'm sure he's probably going to take down now on Scott's page, that people are now linking to some sort of like conspiracy, where the general consensus is that the people who lost their lives at his concert, essentially were murdered as a sort of like a sacrifice to Moloch or something like that. And this is what people are legitimately saying. And this is why I typically don't like talking about these things. But I think they should be addressed. And I think that when you have conspiracy theories that kind of go that far out, it makes critical thinkers who, genuinely take the time to question the nature of their reality, ask questions, try to figure out what is going on behind the scenes. We all kind of get lumped in with people who believe those sort of things. And I'm not judging you to say, if you do believe that, that these musicians are intentionally having people, die at their shows because of some sort of weird offering to whatever like demonic god that they worship. But even as I'm saying it, shit sounds crazy, guys. Like, I'm sorry, it does. And I might lose some followers here, or some listeners here rather, and so be it. But it does sound crazy, because at the end of the day, it's you can't want to be right so much or so strongly that you don't pause and take a step back and approach things from a rational and logical point of view. Okay, so that's what I'm going to try to do with this episode here. Okay, we're going to really start approaching these sort of conspiracies. And if you have other conspiracies that you want to throw at me, that you want me to sit down and apply sort of a logical approach to that, you're welcome to email me at y1bfpodcast@gmail.com. But let's start with this one, okay? Maybe these conspiracy theorists are correct, right? And before I kind of launch in, I need you to understand the premise and why I'm about to kind of go in, because there are legitimate conspiracies out there, okay, that need to be discussed in a rational manner, in a logical manner. That we all need to kind of sit down together and really talk about certain things, right? But the problem is that when people just they don't restrict or they don't apply logic to a lot of the theorizing, then the rest of us who do notice things that are happening in the government or happening in society, right, want to talk about it and say, hey, there might be a conspiracy here. We get lumped in with just everybody else who they think everything is a conspiracy. Right. And so a lot of information, a lot of serious stuff that should be considered kind of gets lost in the fray. And I don't like that. Right. There's been things that have been happening for the last 2 years that if you took a step back and actually thought about it logically, seems like a conspiracy. And there's plenty of evidence to support that. right? If you look at what's been going on during COVID, a lot of the things that are being passed, a lot of our rights are being sort of like slowly getting stripped away under the guise of trying to protect us. But that's clearly how government works, right? You have a bunch of individuals who have no right to rule over you. They don't, right? A government should not, no individual has the right to rule over anybody else, period. Period. If your job as a politician should be to make sure our roads are fixed, right? Make sure that our schools actually educate our young, right? We have a fire department that protects our homes, right, from fire. You have a police department that protects the individual rather than, attempts to maintain or protect the wealthy, which is what we have now, corruption. And then the government should focus on protecting the country, its citizens, right? So having a military whose function is to defend, not to go to other people's countries and, steal their shit, right? Under the guise of, delivering them freedom. Essentially, it's neo-colonialism. Sorry, my brain was going faster than my mouth. Under the guise of democracy, right? Our government is doing too much. And as we go on, as the years go by, the problem with power, right? And the individuals that house power, you need to be the individuals that hold power. You need to be an exceptional individual to be able to temper yourself and to say, all right, I think this is enough. And if you look at the people who are in Congress right now, if you look at the individuals who run corporations right now, because please understand, I actually talked about this on a video on my TikTok channel. We keep wanting to project a potential dystopia that could occur, right? That could happen to us. We keep wanting to project that shit into the future. We are living in a dystopia right now, by definition. Our lives are being run, controlled by government has sort of become too powerful for its own good, okay? By corporations who have become too powerful for their own good, by religious organizations who have always been powerful, right? Maybe they're not as powerful now, but they certainly have held sway over the human, collective psyche of humanity for centuries. There's never been a moment in time, right, in history where humanity did not live in a dystopia, where civilization could not have been defined as a type of dystopia, right? We are certainly not living in a utopia now. Look at everything. You can look at everything that's going on right now. If I were an author, I could sit and write a story about everything that's happening right now. So I don't know why we keep projecting, right? We keep projecting ourselves into a future that, okay, something really bad could happen in the future. Well, it's kind of happening now. And if we don't sit and honestly talk about these things in a clear, rational, and logical manner, right? Really take these things apart and say, hey, this is what I think is going on. It's not that much of a stretch of an imagination to imagine that a small coalition of people, a small group of people who believe themselves to be superior to the rest of us, right, have come together to work in secret to move society to a particular goal that benefits them. I've discussed this on the episode that I did where I discussed Edward Bernays and propaganda. Okay, so the actual father of propaganda literally put it in his memoirs, in his writings, that was their intention. So it's not really a theory when you have people who do kind of make society run and work in a particular way, controlling us by the media. It sounds wild, but it's not. I mean, you can go and read Manufacturing Consent. I've given you these books, right? You can go and read Propaganda by by Bernays. It's all there. And these sort of books were, like I said in previous episodes, they were used by the Third Reich. You've seen them in action. So to imagine that a small group of people would come together, or a small group of very powerful people who have nothing but time on their hands, right, to essentially shape the herd, move the herd in a particular direction, it's not necessarily a theory. Like, that's not a stretch to imagine that that is happening right now. Okay. But that is what, if you say conspiracy theory, we have been collectively programmed to just dismiss it, right? You see it being utilized. You see that label, conspiracy theorist, being utilized in the news as a means to just dismiss an entire person's sort of, or entire group of people's like ideas, simply because they're essentially demonizing people who challenge the status quo. So to go back, the reason why I have a problem when people sort of jump to these conclusions about, like, let's say like the Travis Scott thing, and going into his Instagram page and somehow saying, "Oh, eureka," in hindsight, this was his plan all along, right? It was his plan all along to have people die on his. How does that help him? Come on, guys, like legit think about this. This guy's facing will be facing charges. Certainly will be facing lawsuits. Anything can be interpreted a particular way, especially if you're not really thinking about like in that, you're not thinking in a particular way. Okay. And I'll be clear what I mean by that. Okay. So case in point, I had a video go viral last month. Okay, I'm going to wrap it all. I'm going to tie it all in. So those of you who are new to listening, I always tie it back in, okay? I kind of jump around, but I tie it all back in. I had a video go viral, which is probably how a lot of you guys found me, a month ago. And typically when my videos go viral, I think I had one go 3 million. I had one a couple 100,000. That's the case. But this one, the last time I checked, I haven't checked lately, but the last time I checked was like over 6 million views. Was not expecting that. And for the first week when it was kind of taking off, I would actually sit and read through a lot of the comments. And a lot of the comments were, for the most part, were kind people who were like, whoa, this is mind blowing, right? It was the Apocalypse Again video on my TikTok channel. But then there were some people who were just saying weird shit, right? Like they were saying, like they were questioning who I was as a person, right? They were saying things like I was a plant. And a couple of people were like, is that even a human being? Okay. And a couple of people were like, your paintings in the background look creepy. Like they look demonic. Yeah. And there was like a glitch in the video, which I didn't do. It just did it on its own. And somehow people took that glitch and sort of like which were attempting to use the glitch to dehumanize me. Right. People were saying things. Well, how do you know this? You must work for the elites, or you work for the Illuminati. Or there were a lot of Christians who were coming in there and saying that I was like a devil worshiper because I'm taking theories very playfully too. Like you can watch the video and you can see I'm kind of having fun. And for those of you who have been with me since like my early YouTube days and even my Instagram channel, I had a whole Instagram thing where I would talk about stuff like this. Who I am in a way, this has been the apocalypse again, the quantum immortality theory that we constantly shift through reality. This has been something that's been on my heart that I've discussed. You can see, go on my YouTube channel, go all the way back years. It's time stamped. Okay. I didn't just pop up out of nowhere. I've been talking about this shit for years. I've had this podcast for years. I've had the other podcast for years. So you can find me. Okay, but a stranger who knows nothing about you just sees a video going viral and then they think they know who you are. They take whatever little data that they have and then they reverse engineer like a fucked up theory about you. So I've seen that happen on like a micro level. All I had was a TikTok video go viral. Nobody fucking knows me. You know what I mean? They just know my theory and they know of my TikTok channel, right? And they know that video. So I'm not even like famous, okay, beyond the video, having 6 million views. It was just a thing. Like everybody, I think eventually will have a video, I think, as these sort of things go. I think pretty soon It's going to be normal to have like a video that goes viral or something that goes viral that you produce. Okay, so that's just the future is now. So I don't take that shit like too, like I don't take it too too strongly, I guess, or I don't let it go to my head in a way. In fact, as soon as that happened, I actually backed off of TikToks and stopped putting out videos. Because I needed to take a break, and I just figure eventually like this will pass and then I can just go back to talking to like my regular viewers again, once the attention sort of fades away from me, because I didn't want a bunch of like people listening to me. I wanted people who enjoyed what I had said in my previous videos on the podcast and things like, that we all sort of vibrate on the same wavelength. I wanted to reach those people, and it's very niche, you know? And I shifted to just, talking on the podcast instead. And then eventually, once everything simmers down, I'll put up another video and I'll put up more content and things like that. It was just like, it was a fucking mob, it was a swarm of people, and I'm never comfortable with a freaking like stampede of people in any particular direction. I never have been. It's always, to me, it feels out of control and dangerous to me. So I pulled away. I haven't checked it in like a month. If you guys are wondering why, that's why. But I saw how people who know nothing about you can infer things. My perfectly innocent, paintings. Now people were like projecting their fucked up like perceptions of my art, onto my work based on however they felt in that moment. And that was, a learning curve for me. Like it made me raise my eyebrow a bit. Okay. So now I'm looking at the whole Travis Scott situation. Like I said, I don't typically discuss current events, but this was interesting to me. And this is what I have to say to that. On one end, perhaps these people, I'm not even going to call them conspiracy theorists rather, because it's just dismissive of anybody who has, who's a free thinker and sort of challenges the status quo. They have, whoever they are, right? The PR people in the news that really want to discourage free thinking have demonized the idea of being a free thinker by lumping people up into this category and under this label of conspiracy theory. So I'm not going to use the label, but I'm going to say that people who have these ideas, right, who a tragedy happened, a tragedy occurred, and then they went back to sort of retroactively take information, take images from somebody's social media page, and then utilize it to spin up a narrative and say that this person this is a human being we know nothing about, intentionally did this. On one end, maybe you're right? Maybe they're right. Maybe there really is a bunch of reptilians and doppelgangers or whatever, right? that live in Hollywood and pretend to be human. Okay, fine. And then this is what they do, and they use all this symbolism to lure people, right? And then cause deaths. Maybe that's true. Okay. I don't think so. I don't believe it. But let's just say maybe let's give these people who believe this the benefit of the doubt and say that, okay, they're true. That's true. Okay, then fine. I'm wrong. But on the opposite end, what if you're wrong? What if you're wrong? Okay, so a lot of the references that were used and put together that were pulled from Travis Scott's social media page. I can't believe I'm defending. Yeah. You guys know how it is. Just it feels weird to like be defending a celebrity or whatever, and that's not even what I'm doing here. So I'm not even going to say that. It's just more of I want you guys to just. I hope that with this analogy, you can kind of approach things in a different way. Okay, so what if they're wrong? What if these people who think these things are wrong? Because some people want to believe that they're right. Okay, but this is something that I'm learning as an adult, to stop barreling forward as though everything that I think and perceive is 100% right. I don't know shit. You don't know shit. You can theorize, you can guess, and you can find things to support what you think. But at the end of the day, you don't fucking know. And what if you're wrong? I'm an artist. A lot of my artwork is inspired from paintings in the past. Right now, I'm presently painting, I'm creating series called, Art from an Alternate Timeline. And I have to look at portraits from 300, 400 years ago. Okay? Now, there's a lot of symbolism in paintings from 300, 400, 500 years ago that I may not or do not understand. Case in point, there was a painting that I did. I think the concept of Janus, the double-faced god, right, is fascinating to me. I've always been intrigued by duality. Okay? Facts. This is me. I just, if you go on my Instagram page, scroll all the way down, you'll see that some of my earlier posts were about that, right? Of opposites, duality, because you see it everywhere in our nature, right? There's not in our reality, right? You have light and darkness, right? You have shadow and material, right? Up and down, so it's all around us. And I've always been fascinated with it. And I think the artist, Hieronymus Bosch, had some really interesting shit that he painted. If you ask me to explain what the fuck he was painting, I would say I think he did a lot of fucking drugs or whatever. I don't know. But the imagery is certainly interesting. And I'm also not a religious person, so I would not attach much reverence to said imagery. I think as an artist, I would interpret these images on my own way. And then if I wanted to incorporate them into my art, I would, because that's what artists do, right? Picasso said, great artists steal. He didn't say great artists plagiarize. He said they steal. And I read this book on Da Vinci, and it was described as an artist stealing work isn't that you just see something and then you just straight up fucking copy it, right? An artist, quote, stealing work works in the same way as a bee, quote, stealing nectar, right? When bees collect nectar from all these different sources, from all these different plants, they're not taking the nectar back to their hive to make nectar. They're putting it together and using it as an ingredient to create something else, honey. Right? So that's what typically artists do. They sort of pull inspiration from everywhere. I mean, you have to, right? That's the creative process. Literally, all creativity is it's an amalgamation of ideas from various sources to create something else. Even if you are a religious person, a lot of creation stories, if not all, shows gods creating things out of things that were already present. Okay? You can't bring things out of nowhere, right? You modify, you transmogrify things from one thing. It's like a type of alchemy. That's what creativity is. You just change things from one state to another. That's it. I can't just pull something out of nowhere. That's one of the reasons why, just as an artist, that's one of the reasons why I don't believe in a beginning. I think this always was, right? And the flow of time is the illusion that we experience, so that we because we had a, quote, beginning of at least of our life experience rather, we think that there is a beginning, but that's a limitation of our own minds. That has nothing to do with it has nothing to do with the actual state of this world. Because you pay attention to this thing, to this world all around you, everything is a cycle, even the seasons, it's all a circle. So if I ask you a question, what season came first, right? How you could argue that it was spring, but I could also argue that it was winter, right? I could argue that it was winter because if you wanted to use like a religious perspective, well, in the beginning, right, there was darkness, right? And then, the gods said, let there be light. Yeah. But the darkness would constitute as a type of winter. But then another person would flip it and say, well, it would have to be the spring, right? Because that's where you see everything kind of coming into bloom. You plant the seeds and everything like that. It's all a circle. There is no beginning and there is no end. Okay. So you just pull from what already exists. That is how this world works. And so as an artist, I look at the Astroworld festival with the Travis Scott and the mouth open thing, and I think he probably didn't think about that himself. He's just a figure. A lot of these guys don't have a lot of, if you know a lot of like about LA and what happens in Hollywood and musicians, they don't have a lot of control over their own image and how they're presented, right? For a lot of the time, it's these music, companies that are very careful about how they put these people together, these characters, I forget what the personas, personalities are called together, and how they're packaged and then presented to the world. He's just a kid who, I guess, you could say he got lucky or whatever, but he's just a kid, right? Just a human being. And now he's put in the situation. And a lot of his posts are like curated. They're perfectly curated by teams of people. All of these celebrities have teams. Like, just because you have to sit there and figure out what you're going to post doesn't mean that this applies to them. A lot of thought, energy, and effort goes into what they post and what they present to the media. And because they're working with PR agencies, as I've discussed, right? Propaganda agencies. Okay. You got to really sit with what that means. Okay. Everything that's put out it's done intentionally for a particular purpose that he as an individual probably has no idea of. If you told him about I can't even say the guy's name, Hieronymus Bosch. His name is, if you want to look it up, HIERONYMUS space BOSCH. I don't think Travis Scott would have any idea of what you're talking about. I know about Bosch because I'm an artist, right? And so if I were in a creative team, for example, right, and they said, we need you to put together a stage, something cool that's eye-catching, kind of wild, and fits into this vibe, kind of a dark energy sort of thing, right? I would go in the past and I would find sort of like these I maybe pull from Dante's Inferno. You know what I mean? Like I would pull from these things because that's how artists fucking work. Okay? To suggest then that his team doing this and then him having the big eye thing, right? We see that coming up, the all-seeing eye. We see that throughout Hollywood. Okay. For better or worse, it is what it is. It's there. But I'm not going to say that that eye isn't meant to essentially keep us all in check. It's propaganda. Okay, you can extrapolate from that and say, no, the all-seeing eye means like there's actually like the devil, that they're worshiping, and that's the devil, and that's why it's on $1. Okay, but I've seen this study done that if you paint an eye, right? So this was on Brain Games, the old Brain Games. And they had I think money sitting on a table or something like that. So I'm paraphrasing here because I don't remember exactly what happened, but this is close to what happened. They put money on the table or whatever, and people would go and take it. Then they put the same money on the same table, but this time they painted a big eye. And people avoided the eye like a fucking plague. There's something about being watched that automatically alters your behavior, that makes you alter your behavior. Now, are the people that the elite the so-called elite that I talked about in the beginning of this episode, are they mindful of this? Of the human mind's sort of apprehension to being watched? Do they know on some level that it affects people's behavior? Yes. I mean, that's why more and more we're starting to see cameras pop up all over the place. You get what I mean? And it saddens me because we're probably going to be the last generation to know what it's like to live in a state that was not a surveillance state, where we're not constantly tracked, where they're not cameras, or like our children's children, if we carry down the path that we're carrying on right now, are not going to know what it's like to essentially have privacy. Mark my words. Everything will be on screens. Every moment will be monitored till it becomes sort of normative to not have privacy. And the only people who will have privacy will be the ultra elite. And I should stop calling them elite because they're not. They're just fucked up human beings like the rest of us. They just happen to have money. So we'll just call them the ultra wealthy. And you would need to be able to buy privacy. That's where it's coming. But if you walk into a house and you know for sure that there are no cameras, you kind of act, kind of more normally, but then you become hyper self-conscious if you see a camera, because just the idea that you're being watched kind of freaks you out. And the psychology of this is not a new phenomenon. It's something that people who study the esoteric, who study psychology, who study human behavior have known for thousands of years. That eye of Ra, the thousands of years. And I would argue that even though it sort of has become, as it's sort of evolved into something that's more mystic and sort of reverent rather, I would argue that it was as much used as a means of control for the Egyptians as it is being utilized now, as an eye is utilized now. And the Eye of Ra was never anything evil. And in our present state, it has actually become sort of corrupted. It meant being awake, understanding the nature of our reality, being illuminated, being aware, being conscious, knowing who you really are, not being sort of not believing that you're a beast, but understanding that you're a god. It was not a sign of evil when it, thousands of years ago. Right? Know thyself. See thyself. And somehow through time, these entities now, it's sort of been corrupted. So we're playing with a lot of imagery that we don't understand. I think the previous episode, I talked about the natal chart. I think the episode was called A Manual for Your Avatar or something like that. But, there are a lot of things that we kind of dismiss, like natal charts for one, simply because because of when they originated, right? Because we don't understand it, because our scientists tell us not to take it seriously. So we just dismiss the shit. But more and more, the more I've kind of been looking at this stuff and putting my, friends and family's information in there, or new people I meet in there, just to see this shit is pretty accurate. It's like a Myers-Briggs, but using your birthday. I mean, it is pretty accurate. It's eerie in a way. And I've argued in a previous episode that to me, it supports the whole, my hard deterministic approach. But I would say that the closer we were to the sort of so I don't know what point. There was a point in our history, in our collective history, where we fell. And I don't know when that was. But the closer humanity was to that time period, the more or the better understanding they had of this reality. So astrology played a big part. A lot of kings and rulers and queens as well use this stuff. They had soothsayers. We dismiss it now because we are like teenagers, right? We just assume that our parents are fucking idiots and don't know anything because they're old. So we do the same thing with, our ancestors. We just assume, they didn't have science, so they didn't understand things. But the more I learn, the more I realized that the people in the past knew more about this world than we did. I've drawn parallels before about how Eastern mysticism, Eastern philosophy, and Eastern scriptures are now being proven in Western science, in quantum physics. They're echoing each other. Okay, so maybe we shouldn't be so quick to dismiss things simply because they occurred or they were known about or were practiced thousands of years ago. That's a dumb reason to dismiss something, especially since more and more it's starting to seem as though they knew a lot more about things than we did. So saying all of that to say this. Sometimes an artist, just to be provocative, I don't remember the name of that guy is who sang, call me what you want, call me what you need. I don't remember his name, but he did that whole thing, that music video where he gave Satan a lap dance. And everybody lost their minds. But is he a Satanist, or could he be an atheist who doesn't take that shit seriously, but he figures, hey, this will get people to talk about me? Because bear in mind, a lot of these celebrities just want people talking about them. They want attention. You're drawn to that field because you want that. You sort of live for that. So a lot of them do things intentionally to be provocative, to get people talking about them. A lot of them court attention at all costs. That is actually a law. I believe it's in the 48 Laws of Power. Court attention at all costs. Another sort of media marketing gimmick is there's no such thing as bad publicity. Okay, so just bear all of that in mind before you essentially sort of jump on the bandwagon of blaming somebody for being of saying that somebody is a demon worshiper who made it so that young people died on their concert in order to, I'm uncomfortable saying it. I just want you to think about really how these things work on just a normal level, right? Making things provocative, that is what people do in the media, right? Celebrities, they do things that are intentionally provocative. Okay. A lot of the times too, what artists do is they pull from sources without understanding the power of symbolism. Remember I said that I've been programmed, we tend to dismiss things simply because they happened in the past. They may have inadvertently summoned something or done something to cause chaos by using imagery that you don't fucking understand. Like, if I said something to you, if I mentioned something like an eidolon or a tulpa, most people would have no idea what I'm talking about. But there are people who, in the East, right, know how to manifest tulpas. You can look it up. It's TULPA, right? They're thought forms that you can essentially manifest into this reality. Human beings are more powerful than they realize. And if I said to you, right, our most respected scientist, Isaac Newton, actually dabbled in the occult and studied like occult sciences and mysticism, you would be like, a lot of people would be surprised to hear that. There's information that is made available to the general public that we have access to, right? And it's just mass produced information, right? Then there's layers to this shit. Then there's stuff that we can see, but we can't see until someone tells you what to see. There's symbols that we play with. There's symbols that people, charms and things like that companies and corporations use that they may not even know what they do or how powerful these things are. They just know that it works until, of course, something fucked up happens. So maybe keep that in mind as well. From what I'm reading about, this Travis guy is gonna, like I said, he's gonna be facing lawsuits. It doesn't look to me like this is a person who intentionally wanted people to rush the stage and then people to die. This is a human being that we're discussing. These are human beings that we talk about despite where they are. And I think this is actually kind of fair to say in this day and age. Anybody can become famous now. Like, if you've got social media, if you've got a YouTube channel, if you've got a TikTok channel, you could blink and then boom, go viral for whatever reason. And now people are going to be talking about you in that way. If you are able to take that, 15 minutes of fame or 5 seconds of fame, whatever it is, and spin it into, a career, people will talk about you. And then your life and every move that you make, and if for some reason something happens around you, something bad happens around you, people are going to say what is being said about these individuals. It doesn't even have to be like on that level, like, where you're basically calling somebody like a demon worshiper or whatever and saying that they intentionally sacrifice children at their concert. Like, that's fucked up, guys. Like, it's one thing, maybe you're right, okay? But you don't know. You're just guessing based on what was on somebody's social media page. But I have a lot of symbolism in my art. Like I said, I don't think I finished this thought, but I'll finish it now. I have pulled references from Hieronymus Bosch before in his art, and I used them in a couple of my pieces just because I thought it was fucking cool. There's no way I can, I did read about him as an artist, but not a lot is known about him. So there was some imagery that I thought, oh man, this would look really cool. And I incorporated it into my art. Now imagine I was like a famous artist, right? And then, God forbid, something happened in one of my showings and people fucking died. Yeah. And then somebody went back, looked at my Instagram page, looked at the imagery that I have. I have like a memento mori, like a skull. I just think that shit's cool. I'm not a fucking demon worshiper. Memento mori means remember that you are going to die. It means live your life to the fullest. That's fascinating to me. There's a word part of me that is fascinated by the concept of death. That's it. I was just like a weird emo goth kid. And I still am in some ways, right? I loved the Addams Family. I loved Edgar Allan Poe. It doesn't mean I'm a fucking demon worshiper. It just means I'm interested in sort of the darker aspects of life, which is actually in my natal chart. So, you know what I mean? Like, it literally says that on my chart. Okay? But God forbid something fucked up happens. Now people are going to go back and retroactively look through my artwork and say, oh, look, there's a there's a painting of a two-headed woman, and then start drawing comparisons to whatever the fuck. And somehow now, make me into something I'm not. So on top of having to deal with the fact that at something that you put together, people lost their lives, you also have to deal with the subsequent lawsuits and potentially, hopefully not, but it is a potential. He was charged before by telling people to like rush the stage. To me, it's not. If that was the case, if the case was that this was the event, it was planned and it was intentional, right? I don't think he would have done it in the past, telling people to rush the stage. I think it's a kid who is fame crazy and likes the adulation. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you have a bunch of people facing towards you, all staring at you and like looking at you in like an eager way to hear you talk. That shit's a different experience. And I think a lot of these people get caught up in that, in the power that comes with that. Power makes them drunk. So to know that at any point in time, they can tell people, do this, and they'll do it. If you don't have control of your ego, if you're not an aware, illuminated, conscious, awake person who's actively working on being present, being mindful, and recognizing all of this shit, that shit will go to your head. And then you'll find over time, these people doing more and more because they get addicted to the limelight. I mean, they talk about it. Anything to get people talking about them. It's power. Power is seductive, and it's intoxicating, and it's inebriating. But imagine something like that happened, and now people go back and look through my posts or your posts, and whatever goofy, silly thing that you posted in that moment without giving it much thought gets corrupted. And now, essentially, people are accusing you of being like a fucking murderer or something like that. A Satan-worshipping murderer, right? That's fucking weird. And leave that alone for a bit. So, now let's talk about the Aaron Rodgers situation. I don't know too much about what's going on with him there. From what I've seen, he was not vaccinated, but he basically said that he was. And when he was on top, everybody, was patting him on the back. And now he's going through it and everybody is like demonizing him. I read something saying that State Farm is like slowly pulling his ads and they're going to replace him with somebody else. And to me, once again, it's telling of just how dangerous the herd is. Writing this down. Danger of herds. It's just telling of how dangerous the herd is. Remember I said how addictive power can be, right? Being able to walk into a situation and have everybody just like praise you and adulate you. Remember I told you that when the herd sort of rushed onto my onto my TikTok channel, it actually caused me to pause and take a step back. So I didn't want that shit. I'm grateful that I can get more listeners to listen to my podcast and listen to what I have to say. But there's something a bit unnerving about a herd. The herd freaks me out, guys. Because you could lose yourself in that. If you don't have control of your ego, you can lose yourself in that. There's a quote, I think it was Sir Terry Pratchett that says this. The same people who will cheer at your coronation will cheer at your beheading. The same people who will cheer at your coronation will cheer at your beheading. They just love a show. And so when a person is on top, I think they forget that what goes up can come down. And I think a lot of the behavior that we witness in celebrities, especially as their fame starts to fade and they start doing weird things to like stay relevant, to stay on top. Jada. That's the only person I can think of right now. I'm not even judging her. I understand why she's doing it. It's like she's just trying to court attention at all costs because there's a fear. What if I fall? They have been famous for so long. They have had the adulation of the herd for so long that to lose that would be devastating. And so they do anything to keep the herd at them, right? To hold on to that energy. There was a song, All Eyes on Me, by Bo Burnham. I like the song, so don't get me wrong. But if you go and you read the lyrics, it's interesting because there's many layers to it. There's one part where he says, put your hands up, put your fucking hands up, get up off of your seat, all eyes on me, right? And then he does this breakdown where he says, pray for me, right? He's not a religious person, right? But he's saying, point your hands in my direction, raise your hands, and then pray for me. Put your fucking hands up and then pray for me. Right? That to me tells me somebody that smarts of somebody who understands the energy of the crowd. I'm going to find the lyrics. Hold on. All eyes on me. It actually reads like an incantation of a spell. I'm not saying that that's what he's doing. I'm not saying he's doing it intentionally, but I would not be surprised. Okay, so here's some lyrics here. He said, don't overthink this. Look in my eye. Don't be scared. Don't be shy. Come on in. The water's fine. He goes, get your fucking hands up. Get on out of your seat. All eyes on me. All eyes on me. Get out of your seat. And he keeps repeating the mantra. Now, this is the part that bothered me a little bit where he says, heads down. Heads down. And the song is very it's like a hymn, like a Catholic hymn that you sing. I don't know if you've heard it before. We find it on Spotify. He goes, heads down, pray for me, hands down. Now, he's not saying hands down. He's saying heads down. So he's saying bow your heads, put your hands up, pray for me, all eyes on me. And he's just repeating it over and over again, right? Get your hands up, all eyes on me. Then he says, put your heads down, pray for me, right? To me, that smarts, that reeks of somebody who understands, they've been doing some reading on the occult. They understand crowd psychology. They understand that is energy. You ever sit at a bar or something like that and feel somebody look at you and you turn and then they like pretend that they weren't just staring at you. That's energy. How do you feel that? How do you know? It's like you just look up. You look in the exact direction that that person, you know, on some level, your subconscious knows where that's coming from. That's energy, right? And the opposite end, you have also probably been on the opposite end where you're staring at somebody and then they just suddenly look at you. I've seen this happens to me a lot because I guess I'm just always staring at people. But I'll be like driving in the passenger seat or something like that, but staring at the next driver and then they just look me dead in my soul and I'm like, oh shit. And then we look away. That's energy. And you see a lot of celebrities do this, particularly like the musicians and stuff like that. Like Beyonce has done this. She'll say, put your hands up, stretch them towards me. Kanye does this, put your hands up, stretch them towards me. Look at me. They get high off of that level of concentrated energy. Whether they're conscious of what they're doing, I'm not saying that they are. I'm saying that can be addictive. That can be a rush. Even when I do lives, when I'm done with a live, I have this weird, like, sort of energy where I could just go and run. Like it's, and that's not even like people sitting and looking at me. It's like just people looking at me live on my phone and it's still intense. Okay. So there's something going on. I don't want to run the risk of this episode getting too, esoteric. But I think those of you who understand this stuff know what I'm talking about. Okay. To go back to Aaron Rodgers, it's wild to me because we do this shit all the time. You see this shit happen all the time, right? We gas somebody up, right? They are the greatest at their best. And then the moment they show any sense of being human fucking beings, they've been human this whole time. It doesn't matter. We pedestal them. We raise them up. We worship them as gods, as modern gods. I mean, I'm calling it what it is. That's what we do. And these entities, these human beings as personas, they also they get high on their own sort of worship, right? It's just not a judgment. I'm just telling you what it is. It's really easy for this shit to go to your fucking head. And then when they fall, right, we offer them no grace. We offer them no privacy. We condemn them. We judge them, right? This is what we do. Friedrich Nietzsche said God is dead. We created the gods and then we destroy them. And it's always interesting to me how gods always seem pretty human. And as I said, I think 3 episodes ago on the Woman You Matter episode, I said, I believe that throughout time, and I used the Buddha as an example, we had entities that we elevated as gods, but they were just human beings. I believe Zeus was probably a real person at some point in time. Hera, Thor, Odin, Osun, Ra, Osiris. I believe these were great men and women. And then through time, as it happens, as legends go, they become larger than life. But gods rise and fall. I went to go see a comedian, Ian Edwards, this weekend. Hilarious, by the way. And he started off his show talking about, I can't wait to hear the stories you tell your grandchildren about COVID, right? Because that's what every society does, right? We tend to exaggerate shit, right? He said something like, you're going to be telling your grandkids like how I had to eat. I had to eat my sister for the antibodies or whatever. Like, it's just fucked up and weird. But what I love about comedy is it does make you think, because it's true. I've said that. Like, at the peak of COVID, you would watch the news and the news was like, people are fucking dying. The hospitals are full, yada, yada, yada. And, we go outside and we're in California, and I'm like, people are like at the beach. Like, I saw people, everybody's wearing masks, I guess, but like they're, biking, eating outside, like having sandwiches and ice cream and shit like that. Like, life is going on. It's not, but I bet you when the story is told, right, It's not the 95% of the people who were okay that is going to be, that's not what is going to be told. It's going to be like the 5% of shit that was fucked up. Right? Because we have this thing, this wanting to make things legendary, or wanting to be remembered in a very particular way. The ego, our collective ego, wants to be the greatest generation, the strongest, the hardiest, the one who survived, right? So we have the great pandemic. And I had this older guy, he was like in his 80s. He's like, this is not a pandemic. Like, right? It's an epidemic, really. But it's not that. It's not like the way we are presenting this, it's like the fucking bubonic plague, you know? But like, if you look around, go outside, look outside. And there's never been a point in time when you couldn't just go outside for the most part, especially in the US, and be okay. There are people in other sides of the world, in other parts of the world that can't, not because of COVID, but because just the world is fucked up. They have no medical care. They have no, access to clean drinking water. They have like bugs, that carry disease. But that doesn't matter, right? This is what's going on right now. This is the legend. This is how our history will be retold. And that is what's going to be taught, and you'll see great men and women rise from this time. But we who lived through this time won't remember them as being that great. But the stories that told in hindsight will elevate them to a type of godhood. And so my thought process is, if that's happening, we did that for Churchill until it kind of backfired and everybody started knocking down his statues and stuff like that, right? We've done that for even founding fathers or whatever the fuck, right? Until recently, Columbus and things like that. We have a way of elevating ordinary people to godhood status. And then this could happen posthumously after you die. Even after you die, you could be venerated as a god hundreds of years after you've died, right? Our founding fathers, these were just dudes. Right? But the way we carve their heads into fucking stone in other people's like sacred lands, right? And then we say those are they were human beings, not infallible, right? They were just like us. And but just as we can raise somebody up, like give them enough time, and those founding fathers, watch, they're going to take their faces down, because giving enough time, gods can become demons. Even the Bible. For a long time, you had the Yahweh and he was God. But then you had the Gnostics come along and flip the narrative, right? So just bear this shit in mind, that anything can quickly turn into something else, and vice versa. And we see this all the time. We don't afford these human beings any grace. The crowd affords no one any sort of fucking grace. I remember about this time last year, Aaron Rodgers was the GOAT. And now it's like people are posting pictures of him. Everybody's just talking shit. It's like they forgot that he was a human being. And now that he has shown his Achilles heel, nobody knows what he's going through. We don't fucking care, right? Just crucify him. And then we wonder why we are so fucking miserable. I'm laughing, not because it's funny. I'm laughing because I need you guys to really think about this, right? All these expectations of perfections and infallibility that we project on people we know nothing about. Imagine what we're doing to ourselves. We have no compassion for other people. You cannot have compassion for yourself. You cannot not have compassion for other people and have compassion for yourself. So the same standards, right? When you point that finger, the other four fingers point back at you. For the same lack of compassion and understanding you have for others, that same level of judgmental judgmentalism, I don't know if that's a word, but it is now, that we project on other people, right? That lack of just forgiving people for just being fucking human, for just being imperfect, for making mistakes. What if Travis Scott just made a fucking mistake? What if the shit just got to his head? You know, I've seen videos where he's like telling security guards, hey, go check on those people. I've seen videos where he's stopping. I didn't look for these videos that were sent to me, but you see that he's like not even sure what's going on. So, but they show the crowd. They're like, oh, this is heartbreaking. People in the crowd were telling him to stop the show. Dude is like just trying to do his work. He doesn't know what's going on. The amount of chaos that happened there, I don't think that any of that could have been prevented. And I don't see any of that being intentional. Case in point, I guess to wrap this all up. When I responded to the listener who sent me the videos, and I try to keep my response not a whole podcast, but I was just like, we don't know. This is my short response to that. I was like, we don't know. Maybe people are right and that this was all intentional, be really fucked up. But if it's not, then we're being the assholes. Do you guys remember when I can't remember his name, but the actor who played the Black Panther posted his last picture that he posted of himself on social media, and he was so emaciated. And then people just flooded his shit making fun of him. I forget his name. They were just like, oh my God, what the fuck? Are you doing drugs? Like just tearing this dude apart, laughing at him, right? Yo, what did you do? Oh my God, are you on crack? Like, just destroy this man. Turns out this dude had been fighting colon cancer. You don't fucking know. So now, on top of all of that, he also had to deal with a herd of people abusing and insulting him when all he did was post a fucking picture. That's why this shit is dangerous to me. That's why I constantly say we don't know what we don't know. 1, 2. These, the idea, the theatrics that has sort of been built around these celebrities, right? To elevate them to some level so that we don't come together and say, okay, let's turn our back on all this bullshit, right? It's like Wizard of Oz shit, the illusions. And shit's dangerous. Because at the end of the day, the people who are controlling things, they're not mystical beings. They're not reptilian, baby eaters, whatever the fuck. They just create this mystique around themselves as infallible and all powerful, but they're incompetent humans just like the rest of us. There's not a perfect plan, to dominate. They just want to make money. That's it. It's greed. It's not that fucking deep. Not to say that I don't believe that there are reptilians that live maybe underground, I don't know, really controlling everything, but it's not going to be the fucking Bill Gates. Bill Gates is just fucking douchebag who has way too much money and he believes something, right? So strongly without really any evidence, right? He seems to believe that we have a population problem, which is based on, an idea from the 1800s from some pompous asshole. I forget his name right now. I think it was Malthusian philosophy, the guy, whatever. And so he believes that shit. And his response is he thinks he's going to save the world. And his approach is, well, if we do a good job of reducing the population, then this is how I save the world. It's like he's just a fucking dude. He's just a dude with a lot of money and too much time on his hands. He's got the cheat codes to this world, right? They're just dudes with addresses and names. And even if they dress up and go to the fucking forest to worship a statue, you dress up, if you're a religious person, you dress up and you go into a building with I'm sorry, but a cross is a torture device that they kill people on. A lot of people who are innocent, who just essentially were rebellious and rebelled against the state. That was what they were murdered on. And we wear that shit around our neck and we pray to that shit. That's weird. Okay, from an outsider's perspective, anybody who comes into a Western society and sees that and asks, what is this cross? And you explain it to them, it's weird. You go in and you say, I'm eating his flesh and drinking his blood. That's fucking weird. So even if that is their religion, to go and worship a giant owl, it's kind of weird to worship a dead person's body or a dying person's body and eat his flesh and drink his blood. So it's all weird all across the board. It's different religions all across the board. FYI. And if you think because you worship, if you think because you worship the biblical God, I don't laugh because I think it's funny. I just laughing because it is like it's incredulous. If you think because you worship a biblical God, you're a good person. The Gnostics, which is a whole nother religion, you can look this shit up. Believe that the God that you think is all good is actually a demon, a monster. Duality, guys. Two sides to every coin, two sides to every story. It helps to pause and go, maybe I'm wrong. What if I'm wrong? You see, even with this podcast, with this episode, I presented both sides. I could be right, but I could be wrong. Okay, so if these people who believe what happened at the concert was intentional are right, okay. But what if they're wrong? At some point, we have to learn to have compassion for each other. Even for the greatest amongst us. I know it's not cool to say things like this and try to humanize a celebrity because I guess we're supposed to hate them because they have a lot of money and got lucky and successful. I don't have that kind of energy. I don't care. Like, good for you, right? It's a persona, right? If I, the way I perceive this world, if I wanted to come back as a Jeff Bezos, I can. It's just a character in the game. So at any point in time, your consciousness could choose to come back as Jeff Bezos and then be the world's wealthiest man. I don't think you'll be happy. I mean, you look at his face and he's had a lot of plastic surgery now and he's got all jacked up. Clearly, there's some insecurities there. His fucking spaceship looks like a giant dick. Like, he's got issues that he's trying to work through. Nobody's happy. Right? Happiness is a state of flux. You experience moments of happiness in this world, but it's not a constant state. Nobody's happy just because you have the ability to buy shit. In fact, I feel like that shit gets even more amplified because the moment you realize that, oh my God, like I have everything and I'm still not happy. Now what? What do you do with that? What do you do from that point on? Then you start modifying your face. Then you start modifying your body. Then you start trading your partners or changing your partners, modifying your partner's body. Buying more shit. Grass is never greener. It's all the same grass. Just how you take care of it. Allow human beings to be imperfect, yourself included. The idea of perfection is an infection in the human psyche. I'll say it again. The idea of perfection is an infection. Is an infection of the human psyche. Perfection does not exist, and you are not imperfect. It's a feature. The things about yourself you think of as imperfections are actually features of your persona that you're presently inhabiting. If you don't like it, that's different. But that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means you just don't like it. And in that case, modify that shit. Modify that shit if you don't like it. But don't ever look at yourself and think, oh man, there's something wrong with me. And don't ever look at yourself and think, I need to be perfect. This isn't good enough. Good enough according to who? It's just who you are. Lean into that shit. There's a certain deviousness about my personality, about my persona that people have called out. And there was a time when if somebody would have said that to me and said, hey, you're devious, I would have been like, oh, maybe I should not be devious. But now as I'm getting older, I'm like, yeah, I am. It's just, sometimes I am. That's an aspect of this personality. And I kind of like it. It's okay. You know, I'm quirky in some ways. I forgive myself for being myself. It's nothing to forgive, of course. It's just an expression. But you should have a certain level of acceptance for what society calls imperfections. Nobody's perfect. Remind yourself of that. Nobody's perfect. No one, no one, no matter how much they try to project it, that we all have our insecurities, we all have our internal monologues. Even you guys who don't think you have one, trust me, you do. If you depressed, if you ever sat down and projected yourself in the past that doesn't exist and worried, projected yourself in the future, and had regret, invert that. It's there. That's that voice that's making you miserable. It's there. And we're all susceptible to it unless you're actively working on it. Unless you're actively working on suppressing it, or you're actively working on detaching yourself from it, right? Disentangling from its suggestions, so to speak. But if you're busy judging others, if you're busy pointing at others, what you're doing is, right, especially when a person is at a weak point in their life, if you can't take a step back and look at them and say, listen, this is a human being having a human experience, and at this present moment, this is a weak spot for them. And if I were in their shoes, I would want people to leave me the fuck alone and let me fucking process this shit, because this is a hard moment in my life. And then taking a step back and just really trying to put yourself in people's shoes and respecting that, because that could be you one day, a different incarnation. Maybe you right now, since time is an illusion, right? Or I should say the flow of time is an illusion. Could be you right now. If you don't learn to grant people the same level of compassion and understanding and grace that you would want to be granted to you, what you're doing is strengthening that damnation in yourself. And just as you can damn other people and judge them, you're strengthening that internal monologue's ability to damn you and judge you and see your weaknesses and your bad days as, something that you should feel like shit for and to be attacked for and brought down and accused. And the difference is if somebody is upsetting you, online or something like that, you can log off social media. But if you have strengthened, I don't know why I can't say the word, strengthened your internal monologue, right? Throughout the years, you've just taught it to judge others, right? Through the judgment of others, you strengthen your internal monologue. So making that shit strong. You're making its judgment muscle strong. It's going to turn that shit on you. It's going to criticize everything you do. Every quote failure, right? Every misstep becomes a failure. As you guys have known, I've talked about depression, and going through it on this podcast, myself personally. I mentioned things that have worked. Focusing on things in the peripheral of the vision is one. I've started taking sulforaphane. You can get this from Amazon. It's basically broccoli sprouts. So I take broccoli sprouts in powder form and pill form. Have it in the morning. I feel amazing. It allows me, it actually, there's research. I mentioned this in the last episode. I'll mention it again. There's research out there. Just type in like sulforaphane and anxiety, sulforaphane and ADHD, sulforaphane and Asperger's. It's a chemical that's found in broccoli sprouts and cruciferous vegetables that just balances your shit out. Like to use, non-scientific terms, it balances your shit out. I feel zen as fuck. And it's legal. I don't even use mushrooms anymore. It's helped me greatly. I suggest that. But another skill that I've added to that is, in addition to reading the two books I mentioned before, which is The Untethered Soul and No Self, No Problem. Those two books, No Self, No Problem by Chris Niebauer, because there's two versions for some reason. But you want the one by Chris Niebauer. Got disconnected there. So No Self, No Problem by Chris Niebauer. When you listen to that book, okay, what it does is it teaches you how to create space between yourself and the internal monologue and to watch what it says. Like really listen to it. And I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself. I got cut off there in the recording, so I'm not sure where it left off or not. So I'm just going to I'm trying to delve right back in. But what that book did was present a scientific explanation to that internal monologue, right? And it says that essentially it's your left brain. The way it works is it essentially tries to prevent you from being in situations where you harm yourself in order to allow for you to continue to survive. Okay. Now, the human body, like hundreds of thousands of years ago, when it was roaming the safaris or whatever. It benefited you having that voice. Okay. Because like if you were in grasslands or something like that, and you out of the corner of your eye saw something move, right? That kind of broke the pattern of behavior, pattern of movement of, say, the grass, the high grass, or whatever in a safari, or in the highlands, whatever. If you assumed the worst, that it was a tiger or a big cat waiting to, lunge at you, rather, you ran a greater chance of you increase your chance of survival. So the internal monologue, its function was for it to basically seek out or look out for threats to your person, and then alert you to that threat. We're no longer in the savannah, right? We are no longer in the Serengeti. We are in the safety of our homes. We have walls up, we have ring security, we have guns, things of that nature. So we as a society have evolved past that, but the biology, the programming is dated to 100,000 years ago. And that is what that internal monologue is. Yeah. And other authors have written about this as well. I'm trying to think. I want to go back into Audible to try to find the author of another book that comes into mind that kind of explains this well. Because I run the risk of stopping my recording. I don't want to do that, but I'm here so far. Let me see if it's gonna just pop up without me having to go too far deep. But in this other book, whose title I'm looking for right now, the author talks about essentially, they explains it as well. Let me see. Give me 1 second. Will I be able to find it? I may not be able to find it. Oh, there we go. It's called The Case Against Reality by Donald Hoffman. For those of you who are also looking for book recommendations, what I've read this week so far, if you're interested, The Art of Hunting Humans, I'll come back to that. What else have I read? That one was a good one. I read it a couple of times. I read On the Genealogy of Morals by Friedrich Nietzsche. Love it. Would really strongly recommend it. And I read Just Six Numbers by Martin J. Rees, which was very interesting. It's more quantum physics based, and it basically breaks down. To me, it supports the simulation hypothesis. The author doesn't. The author doesn't think that it suggests an intelligent designer. But to me, that's just a failure to. I think that's just more stubbornness than anything else. You want to see reality from a materialistic perspective, even though everything is pointing to designers, intelligent designers. You don't have to believe in an intelligent designer or a programmer of our reality, and also accept the Bible. Like the two are mutually exclusive. It bugs me when people do this. But it basically talks about the speed of light, law of conservation of matter, all these other laws. And he breaks it down and said, these are the constant that we essentially exist in a Goldilocks zone. And he does a great job of explaining that, to the reader, to the listener. He basically says anything deviated by any fraction, none of this would exist, which tells me that obviously this is intentional. So I like that book because it supports, if you're looking for something to like another sort of bolster of the simulation hypothesis on a support of that from like a physics point of view, I would recommend that. The God Theory by Bernard Hesch was written by an astrophysicist, but it's on his sort of perception of our reality, and he talks about an intelligent designer, and he supports his argument. Based, to me, I don't agree with everything that he says, but it was a good sort of reinforcement. I just like reading things that reinforce the fact that we're living in a simulation, just more and more bolstering that theory for me. So I recommend those two. On the Genealogy of Morals by Friedrich Nietzsche, my faves so far, because he really gives a different approach to morality. And I think it's worth visiting. I really do. Because there's a quote that I was sent, I think today, that tickled me. I'm going to find it real quick and I'll share it with you guys. It was something to the effect of, hold on. Am I going to find it? Sorry, guys. I feel like I should have this shit ready before traditions are basically dead people peer pressuring us. That tickled me for some reason. Because I guess it fits into like my whole scheme, my whole thing. But I think Nietzsche basically takes that standpoint, not that candid, but he basically tells us like what we think of as morality is just like it was defined and determined by us. There was no great power that like came down from the mountain and said, do these things, right? These are all human beings, right? So a lot of the traditions that we adhere to, a lot of what we consider a morality is essentially just ways in which other people control other people. That's it. And in his argument, it's weak people trying to manipulate people, manipulate stronger people to sort of serve the weak in a way. So that's a great read as well. So those are the books that I've read this week. Those of you who are interested, check it out. And The Art of Hunting Humans, I think the title is intentionally provocative, but I don't want to spoil it, the ending of it. But you'll get the gist of why the author is writing what he's writing. It's just a different approach to self-help and just understanding mass psychology and human nature. Very helpful. And his conclusion is essentially you have to become like a superior human. In the sense of not being reactionary, things like that. But it just reinforces all of that. So all of these are great reads. Just FYI. But to go back to what I was talking about, so the internal monologue, its purpose, its function is to find problems, right? To protect you by alerting you. It's an alert system, which the art of hunting humans kind of talks about that. He calls it your captain. He doesn't directly discuss. He refers to it as the mind, but I want to take it a step further and say it's not the mind, it's the internal monologue, because the mind is dual, right? It's left brain, it's also like right brain. And then I think your consciousness, and the force field around you also falls into the mind. So I don't think it's quite the mind. I think what he describes in The Art of Hunting Humans is your internal monologue. And that's like a scout or a lookout. And it looks for shit to be wrong. Okay. And what it does is it amplifies something that you're insecure about to get you to pay attention to it, to protect yourself. All it wants is to protect you. I've taken different approaches to the internal monologues. You guys have grown with me. So the approach I'm taking this week is just anything to help you guys better understanding and help myself better understanding. I'm going to talk about it. But his approach is that its intent is to protect you, but it's just kind of like an alert system, like a warning system. That's just kind of like, the alert is turned up way too high. It's like if you have a ring and you have the sensitivity turned up too high, everything, a bird flying, leaves moving, becomes a threat. Yeah. And then it uses what you're most afraid of, right? And it amplifies it so that you listen to it to pay attention, right? So it's an alarm. Hey, this person isn't texting you back because, hey, here's your fear. What are you afraid of? Rejection, because they're rejecting you, but they're not. You don't know if they're rejecting you or not. Maybe they are, but at that point in time, all you know is that they haven't texted you back. And 10 times out of 10, all of the shit that the internal monologue is spitting at you is wrong. Stop fucking listening to it. You're not constantly under threat. We're no longer in the Serengeti. We're no longer in the savannah. You're in the fucking suburbs. Okay? Not everything is a threat. It's not a threat to your existence. It's not a threat to who you are as a person. The only thing that it can hurt, the only thing that somebody not texting you back can hurt is your ego, and only if you allow it. That's it. So the internal monologue is just essentially an alarm system that's just overly sensitive and no longer needed to that level of sensitivity in the society that we live in right now. But when I have, with the broccoli sprouts, it allowed me to kind of pause, take a step back, create separation space, and actually sit and observe this thing and listen to it talk. And I realized exactly what I just told you, that it's a warning system. It takes what you're most afraid of and amplifies it based on very little to no evidence beyond one thing. You expected to get a call back today for a job. They didn't call you back. All you know is that it didn't call you back. They didn't call you back, but somehow it amplifies that you didn't get the job. And then you just fixate on that and make yourself suffer for no reason and panic for no reason, right? Because you believe the alarm, right? The alarm's going off. That's your internal monologue. You didn't get the job. You didn't get the job. You can't provide for yourself. You're not going to be secured. And when you pay your bills, you're not ever going to find a job yet. It's all your fears amplified like a warning. It's a warning system. It's an alert system that is out of control and too sensitive. But you need to recognize that it's a warning system. It's an alert system that is out of control and too sensitive. And then take a step back and say, okay, turn that shit off. All I know is that they just didn't call back, and they might be not calling back because they're trying to get me more money, right? If you can imagine the worst, you can imagine the best. Or sometimes if I can't muster like a positive thing, I'll just go, well, they didn't call me back because they died. That's right, because that's just as believable as them rejecting you. So why is it got to be something that would hurt your feelings? Why is this internal monologue saying something that would hurt your feelings, right? Just bear all of that in mind. But at the root cause of it is having compassion for yourself. If you have compassion for yourself, then you won't tolerate, what the internal monologue says to you about you, right? You would be like, no, that doesn't work. That's not me. That doesn't fit. I'm okay. I'm cool on that. Thank you. Right? You detach from it. And then by doing that and learning to accept yourself for just, hey, this is just a feature. This is who I am. This is my persona. These are my quirks, right? If I'm a sim, then all of this shit was pre-programmed before I even came into the game. That's just part of my psyche. If I don't like it, I can change it, but it doesn't mean there's something wrong with me, right? It's just not working out. It's not how I want to play the game, so to speak. Modify accordingly and keep it moving, but don't make it like there's something wrong with you. The moment you start doing that, the moment you should be able to also apply that same level of compassion and understanding for other human beings, right? There's nothing wrong with them. That's just a function of who they are. That's just how they operate. That's just how they flow. That's how they were programmed before they came into the game. That's how they're playing the game. And maybe they might decide it doesn't work for them to act a particular way, right? And maybe you can suggest, hey, you know what? Instead of doing this, maybe you should try doing this instead. I'm not trying to tell you how to live, but you might experience a better, more easy game, right? The game might flow differently for you if you take a different approach, but that's just who you are. That's a function of your character. I'm not saying you keep people in your life. You don't want them in your life if they're acting some type of way. If they are acting some type of way and, aspects of the personality doesn't mesh with you, or it's chaotic, or it's dramatic, or it's even toxic, or just, I don't even know if I like the term toxic, more it doesn't click with your personality. You're not trying to have like a negative game experience. If other people want to, that's on them, but that's just not the game experience that you're choosing. And that's okay. And you can at any point in time just say, hey, this doesn't really vibe with me, where I'm at in my life. I kind of want to go this way. And you can let people go without demonizing them, without literally just castigating them and making it seem like there's just something fundamentally wrong with them, right? Because in order for things to be fundamentally wrong with them, on some level, you're also acknowledging that your quirks, means that there's something fundamentally wrong with you. And it doesn't. You're just not compatible, and leave it at that. It's okay. All right, guys. I always promise that I'm going to do more than one episode a week. I've been doing that the last 3 weeks, and then I get lost in work and things like that. And then I don't. And then I'm like, oh, my bad. I shouldn't have said that. So I apologize for all the times I said in the past 3 episodes where I said I was going to do more than one episode and then I didn't. My bad. So I'm not going to promise that this week. We're just going to stay weekly. And if something if you guys have any questions for me that you want me to answer, hop on the Discord and leave your questions. I'll check as I can. There's a lot going on over here. I've been getting interviews for newspapers, which is interesting, completely unexpected for me, but I'm just going with the flow. And I also have my art that I got to focus on and things like that. And we're doing some stuff with our house. So there's a lot going on my part. So I definitely will not neglect the podcast. That is, first and foremost, my priority. And I appreciate your patience, but right now I'm going to try to keep it, 1 episode a week. And then if I do have something to talk about, or somebody sends a really dope question, and I have the time, I'm going to hop on and do a, brief discussion, whatever, just to keep touching bases with you guys. So, there was an individual who went through all of my episodes and commented on everything. And I haven't had the chance to kind of go back and, sort of read through all of his comments, but I wanted to give him a shout out now. Let me see if I could pull up his name. Dang it. Where is it? You guys are like, we don't have time for this. But let me see. Hold on. Shout out to him. And literally anybody who goes on the YouTube and comments, and you guys are really helping me out, because the more people that interact, with the app, the more it helps kind of boost my videos. His name was the Renaissance Ronin. I am seeing your comments, okay? I may not have time to kind of go in and like respond to all of them, but I am seeing your comments. And you've left, very thoughtful comments. So thank you. Really appreciate you. So keep listening. And if you have any questions for me or things you want me to discuss further, go ahead and let me know. And to all of you who interact with, with my social media and things like that and follow, on Instagram and all of that, thank you so much. Looking forward to hitting you guys up either during the week or sometime next week. Enjoy your week.